to the Living Farms podcast, the place where we discuss biodynamic practices worldwide for you, your farm, and the planet. So, welcome to the Living Farms podcast. I'm very happy today to have Katrina Wolf from New Zealand with me. And she's I would say, social media expert of biodynamics. So we are going to talk about the pros and cons about social media for biodynamic agriculture, education, teaching, training. And welcome, Katrina.
Thank you so much for having me. So lovely to meet you. We both said in person, even though this isn't in person, it feels like we're meeting in person for the first time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I follow your work for a long time now already. You're quite active in the social media. I know you from Instagram, but you're also active in other channels. So tell us, how did you came across biodynamics? How did it lead you where you are currently in your life?
Wow. I need to go back. We're 2023 now. So if we go back to 2006, I had returned to New Zealand from living in Japan for 5.5 years. The children were, I need to do the maths, 8 and 4. And we enrolled them in the Waldorf school, Waikato Waldorf school. And so that was my introduction to anthroposophy. And my ex-husband did teacher training. We moved to Titirangi. He became a class teacher, and I was in a brand new community, didn't know anyone. And so I went to a reading group. I did Eurythmy, the Steiner parent things. And at the reading group, which was hosted by Peter Bolin, Neeltje and Peter Bolin, Neeltje was an art therapist. We would gather socially and do stirs. And that was how I found out about biodynamics. And we were reading, I think the first series of lectures I read was Lucifer and Ahriman by Rudolf Steiner. And so there was ample opportunity to ask lots of questions, and it led me down the rabbit hole. And so it was around 2012 that I organized a community 500 stir. It was like there was a World Biodynamic Day. And I had only stirred at Peter and Neeltje's house. And it was like, am I allowed to organize a stir? Like, am I qualified? And I did it. And it was as if the community had been waiting for someone to say, let's stir. And so we stirred. And then it was maybe a week or two later, people said, so when's the next one? Or we'll do this again, won't we? And it kind of fell to me to pick a date. So I had to, research, well, when do we stir next? Like, if it was autumn, is it spring, or do we wait a year? And so I kind of found myself being the person who was organizing stirs. And then at some point I ordered a set of compost preparations, and I was skeptical. Really skeptical, like these little plastic packets with this powder, like, come on. And I put them into a compost bin and forgot about it because I was using 2 bins, so I moved to the other one. And it was a few months later when I opened it up, and I was just blown away. Like, it was like crumbly chocolate brownie that was all moist and fine, and I was holding the soil, and it was like it redefined compost for me. That I just went like, far out. This is real. Like, this is really important. So from that moment on, I was hooked. And then at some point, my marriage ended, and I was in different relationships. Each of them were like long distance relationships. And these houses that I would go and visit, I found myself planting edible gardens, like these different people around the world. It was like, oh, let's go to the garden center. Oh, you don't have a compost? Like, you're not composting? And so by 2018, I was kind of like almost a serial edible garden installer, that it turned into a great business idea. So Blue Borage was born in 2018. It's exactly 5 years ago. And a lot of people around me said biodynamics was too niche, it wouldn't work as a business. And so the only way to validate the business idea was to find the people who thought it was a good idea. And they weren't near me. And they weren't in my local community. They actually went to New Zealand. And so I studied digital marketing, and Instagram was more fun than Facebook. And it became what I call my water cooler moment in the day. And I only needed like half a dozen people to go, oh, finally, someone's talking about this in a way that makes sense, that gave me the feeling like I was providing for those half a dozen people what I wished someone had offered me at the beginning. So instead of watching documentaries and YouTube channels and reading books, that if I'd seen someone, you know, that looked like me, sounded like me, had a normal home garden, was raising children, was a single mum, was trying to eat well on a low budget, that I would have gone, oh, I can do this. That I don't need to own a 500-acre farm and learn how to milk goats, you know, that it is possible to do biodynamics authentically on a tiny scale. So yeah, social media became where it was. I mean, I'm a business, so I'm selling a coaching service, I'm selling online courses, I'm meeting potential clients. But initially, it was really just to practice saying what I do out loud. So it was training my own creative self-expression and finding my brand and my vision and my voice. And took a long time, but it's been fun. It's so much fun.
Great to hear, because I what I hear from you now, which is quite a similar experience I have made with biodynamics, is that getting the information about how a good compost would look like, or how the preparations are done, how the stirring is done, and so on, is sometimes challenging, or can be like a cluster of different information with different people. And if you don't have the connection with the people, then you might find it difficult to get the information. So what was your experience in this way? How did you get your information from? How did you know how a good compost would need to look like, for example?
It was that one occasion when I opened it up, and like I can still sort of imagine and feel it, and not every batch turns out that good. That it's like trying to reach that sort of level of passion again. There was a pivotal meeting. Alan Gorthy, who's a biodynamic mentor, arrived in Auckland, I think it might have been late 2017, and he was teaching workshops. And the first one he taught was on valerian and stinging nettle, and it was 2 hours long. And I thought, seriously, 2 hours on 2 plants? And I went along, and he spoke about, I think it was stinging nettle first. He spoke for almost 90 minutes. And I put my hand up and said, I really want to hear about stinging nettle as well. And we're going to run out of time if we don't move to the next plant. So yeah, I kind of followed his workshops around Auckland, and that's where I really got the sort of hands-on, practical, what we're striving to do in a tangible sense. Because yeah, it's hard to learn online. And I think one of the reasons I'm really keen on social media for biodynamics is that I want my customers to know who is within driving distance, that they can go and see and feel and touch and talk to and work together with other practitioners.
And how is that working? Like, how are the people reacting, and what kind of people are following your channels? And like,
So
maybe
many different sorts of people. There is, in business trainings, they often say, find your ideal customer avatar. And I don't have one. They're just so varied. There are families, there are single people, there are older people, there are a range of cultural diversity. Yeah, it continually surprises me. I think one thing that a lot of my customers have in common is a love of flowers and beauty and a sort of gentle attitude. We're lots of highly sensitive people, just softly spoken, and no striving for being the best. It's just more about loving it, really. Yeah.
and how did you start? Like, what were your first posts, and how did you decide what you are posting and what kind of practices you are keeping for yourself, so to say?
The very first posts, I was in a state of close to breakdown emotionally from some things that have been happening. And one of my colleagues, who's now a dear friend and working for Auckland Council, she had worked in sort of crisis related areas. She said, Katrina, just keep a journal of what brings you joy every day. And it was a discipline to notice the flowers that were opening for the first time that season, or the bees on the borage, or the colors of leaves, or something that I cooked from the garden, or sorting worms and like how good the worm casting felt. So these little moments of joy were the things that I wanted to capture visually for the Instagram feed, because I sensed that, back in 2018, I think Greta Thunberg had just kind of started to become a public figure, and there was a lot of climate anxiety and fear. And I felt, for the sake of young people, that I wanted to show a way of being active and being fully embodied in this sort of sense of trust and wholeness and less anger. So that's what I was trying to show. And it's evolved over time. I think it's really evolved. And I think at the moment, I'm kind of niching into this space of bringing classical music and art, and even like performance art, and ways of using weeds to weave and make creative sort of objects out of them. It's fascinating, and trying to sort of bring all the things that I love together in one image, so that soil looks almost out of place, like it makes people go, what? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point you're mentioning, because I mean, social media is not just, it has potentials, but it also has dangers. And some scientific studies suggest that people who spend a lot of time on social media are actually more prone to depression or something like this, because you're totally right, there are so many bad news, so to say, on social media. And I think now more and more Instagram influencers, for example, really try to spread positive news. I just know a channel from Jay Shetty. He's one of the big influencers in the US, and he's doing world tours, and he was a monk for some time, and he's just posting every day like three nice videos of people who are having a happy marriage, or people who are dancing in the rain, or I don't know, making something nice. And I think that's a good chance for biodynamics, because biodynamics is so much about community and connecting positively with the earth. And doing something, as you said, with your hands and with your senses. And I feel this is something which is really lacking for the people at the moment. I mean, when we are working so much on our desks, that the sensory elements are quite important. So, like, do you just do this on purpose, or does it flow naturally? Or you also mentioned the marketing experience studying you made. So how did you dive into this topic more?
Firstly, on that topic, I want to say that the dangers are very real. And I was having a conversation with my daughter, who's now 24, and saying that, yeah, I'm addicted. And it is my social network. Like my best friends, I talk with them on Instagram. And I follow their work on Instagram. And it's not that I'm completely isolated, but there aren't many people where I live that understand my work. You know, I'm in a very small rural community. I'm surrounded by conventional farms. And New Zealand's not a big country. That the anthroposophical community is not that big, and the biodynamic community is not that big. And within the biodynamic community, I joined the Biodynamic Council here in New Zealand because I was really adamant that beginners needed to be welcomed, and home gardeners were just as valid as the wine growers and the cheesemakers and the dairy farmers. That if we have informed consumers, we'll have more customers, and then there'll be more. So what I was going to say about social media and it being addictive, there's a documentary called The Social Dilemma that I think anyone who's considering marketing on social media should watch that and go into it with eyes wide open. And I think one of the reasons I've decided it's okay for me is that my children have left home, and I'm an empty nester. You know, I don't need to be cooking a family meal every night and having that quality time. I'm not helping them get ready to school and doing all the chauffeuring that I used to do. That it's not something I would recommend taking on with child rearing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a challenging thing if you start to be creative and kind of design good posts and videos. And I think that's also something where farmers are afraid of doing, because it's a different kind of thing to be creative on social media or be creative on a farm, so to say. But you, from my perspective, you manage well with both, combining both. So
okay, so to answer the business marketing side of things, I have spent so much money on marketing courses and training and coaches, and there's a lot of advice that's based on manipulative psychology. That, again, I would say be really careful who you trust. And I think we all, there's a sense of recognizing truth when you see it. And I know you're a musician, I'm a musician, that when you play music and you feel the resonance of something that's truly beautiful, you can recognize that in some of the business coaches in the world. So there are two that I would mention. One, Ruth Poundwhite has been a big influence on me, and she started her business as an introvert, wanting to be herself online. And one of her key phrases is, slipped out of my mind, you're the right person for your right people. That we are all so unique that we just need to be ourselves. And when we shine bright as our true selves, then the right people recognize that as truth. And the other people will find their person. And I'm not for everyone, and it's fine. The other person that's been really helpful has been Amy Walsh. And she has a program called the Visionary Syndicate within the Bureau of Tactical Imagination. And so she works with a lot of creative business owners who are kind of trying to break capitalism or build a better way of doing business in the world. And what she taught was creative directorship. So becoming the creative director of your business and being visually paradigm shifting in a way, and going deep and letting that shine. And one of her sort of key messages was that when your work is so broad and rich and deep, you can't throw it all at people all the time, all at once, that it's got to be bite-sized little snippets. And if people want more, they'll come back, and then they get another snippet. And maybe it's like an artist with a body of work. You go into a museum or an art gallery and you look at each picture one at a time. That there's no real logical starting point and end point. You wander to where you feel pulled. So within my work, some people are really into working with herbs, and others are flower farmers, or there'll be people that want to grow the most delicious vegetables, or who are worm farmers, that they'll find the little pieces that resonate with them.
That's a good point, because for me, one of the challenges with biodynamics and social media is that biodynamics is so beautiful, complex. So it's for me, it's really an art of farming as well, so to say. And sometimes social media is and has to be, in a way, a little bit superficial, I would say. So it can function as an entry point for people to get interested with a certain topic. But for example, when I started with media work for the section of agriculture at the Goetheanum, the average time of people spending to watch a video was above 3 minutes. And then within the last years, it decreased. Now I think we're saying that reels should be between 15 to 30 seconds. So and for me, it's always a challenge. I mean, already to communicate biodynamics in 3 minutes is quite challenging, but to communicate it with 15 seconds is it's not easy. But when you say this now, like to just have small snippets of information, and there you can go still into depth, then this would be a good possibility, I think.
And I would say you can communicate something profound in 2 seconds. Just the vortex in a bucket, just 2 seconds of that, with even one line of text. If someone is scrolling and they catch sight of that, I think something happens in their brain. And if enough of us did that, we would normalize the practice of stirring quite quickly.
And how do you see the current communication of biodynamics is? I mean, because I still think that in a lot of the communications we are attached to making, as you said, like with the plants, to talk about the plants for a long time. And then, of course, there are valuable information in it, but sometimes it could be easier communicated with maybe experiencing it. Are we too much head-based in communicating biodynamics? Or should we rather focus on communicating in a more experienced way? So to experience the biodynamic practices rather than talking about it.
I think what I would say to that is that anyone who wants the information can do a Google search and find it. It's all out there. The books have the step-by-step, the why, the how to, the how much, the when, the what. It's all there. What I think is missing for a lot of people is personal reasoning. And so I did a survey yesterday and today saying, what is it about my social media that you find useful? And I asked people who follow me. And so many of them are saying that I really enjoy seeing you in the garden talking about why you're doing this thing today. And I'm just one person. I'm not the perfect person, and there'll be other people that have different reasons for doing different things, but it's one example of how to do it. And I think that is, if people can see themselves a little bit in what I'm doing, then they go, oh, I could do that too. Gosh, that's really easy. She just like put a bucket outside in the rain, and the next morning it was half full of rainwater, and now she's like that thing that I saw her make a month or so ago. She's now in that bucket, and that only took 10 minutes. I thought biodynamics was really difficult. That doesn't look difficult. I could do that. I went down to visit my daughter and my granddaughter, who's just turned 1, and I stirred CPP with my granddaughter, and she had her hands in the bucket. She's just kind of playing with the water, and then when I'm sprinkling it out of the garden, she's dipping a container and throwing it. And why not? Yeah. So I avoid a lot of the intellectual explanations because I know, A, other people are doing that really well, and I'll leave it to them. And B, people can go looking for that online and find the factual information that they're looking for quite easily.
Yeah, so maybe I was really happy to see this because I just saw it today before doing the podcast with you, that you just ask your community about your social media and what they are thinking. So maybe if it's okay for you, we can dive a little bit into the reactions and see what the people were saying, or how they behave for social media.
Yeah, okay. So I'm opening the file up. So I've got oh, I've got 28 responses, which doesn't sound like a lot from, there's 5,000 people following me on Instagram. But the energy it takes to click and fill out a survey, I'm quite happy with 28. So first question. If you watch my Instagram stories, even just a few of them every now and then, what do you find useful or interesting? All of it. Another person said, the realness of the content. You're out there doing actual things to make a difference and educate people. Relevant information for us in our composting journey and integrating worm farms into our garden. I like seeing the different places you teach and garden. I know very little about biodynamics, so seeing it put into practice is interesting. I get lots of ideas watching what you do, and you also give me interesting things to think about. And someone said, all the small pockets of wisdom that you share. I often just kind of randomly ponder, this happened yesterday, and it's got me thinking this, and this, and then, yeah. Tips and tricks, real live footage. It's casual, personal, and really informative content. This person said the story, the progress, and the result, your outlook, ideas for the future. I think people like to see the human being, like the flaws, and oops, that didn't work. Let's try this instead. What else? I'll go on to the next question, which was, would you like to see other biodynamic gardeners, farmers, and growers using social media more? Why or why not? Real split here. Lots of people saying yes, lots of people saying no. Nah, I'm on my phone enough. Yes, biodynamics has a bit of a woo-woo aura about it, but seeing more people use it, show others, brings it to the fore and may get more people interested in giving it a go. Kind of depends on the person. This one's very strong. Absolutely. This is currently our main communication forum. And one of my favorite connections from Instagram is with Robin Wolf of Waldorfish, the online homeschooling course for Waldorf homeschoolers. And she said, that's where people are. We need to be where the people are. And I feel like if we hide biodynamics, then the people who are ready for it, how are they going to find it? Especially if they live in the middle of nowhere, that there's no one in their area practicing it. The next question was, should I leave the term biodynamic out, given that it's a little bit off-putting for some people? Because sometimes I don't mention it. It's just common sense gardening. And I think Rudolf Steiner didn't name it biodynamic. Someone else did after the agriculture courses. I'm not sure of the exact history of the term biodynamic, but I've heard people call it cosmic agriculture, holistic agriculture, spiritual agriculture. So when I asked that question, people, again, different sort of polarizing reaction. No major need to use it, in my opinion. Either works. I would keep it in. They will soon realize the magic they are mastering. Not sure. I think some people do react negatively. Indifferent. Dropping it in every so often casually makes it seem undaunting. One person, leave it out, black and white. Then the next one, yes, mainstreaming it, normalizing and taking away the fear through sharing real life information in plain language that is relatable. Keep doing it. At some point, people get to try and see it is not hard. Yeah, I'm going to send you this file and I'm going to summarize it in a blog post and we can put that in the link.
Lovely.
With this. Yeah.
And this last point is for me quite crucial because I would say there's for biodynamics, and I've been working for organic agriculture since, I don't know, 15 years or something like that. So, but for biodynamics, I have the feeling that there's a big difference between the statements of press media and the experience people are making on the farms. So for those working in biodynamics, it's quite common knowledge that people kind of feel that it's a different kind of farming when they visit their farms or garden. That's energetically something happening there, and that the food has such a good quality, and and you feel more nourished eating biodynamic food than if you eat food produced in other forms. And at the same time, presses and media, I don't know how this is in New Zealand actually, but here in Europe it's quite a big thing that press is spreading negative words about biodynamics. And so this leads to a situation where people, and I would say in particular farmers, are sometimes afraid of talking about biodynamics or mentioning even that they are biodynamics. So we know this from wine growers. They are not putting a label or the word biodynamics on their wine, but they do this basically. And they get the best prices for the best wines. And so how do you feel we can overcome this gap of personal experience and press, negative press?
It is so hard. And I've had so many top-notch business coaches say, drop it. You will have more financial success without using the word biodynamics. And I could. But the whole reason I started Blue Borage was to help make biodynamics mainstream. And that is like, if I have to hide the reason I started my business, then I'd rather, I don't know, go work in a garden center or something. And looking back in recent history at the people that have now become famous who obscured biodynamics, if they had just been a little more courageous, we could be in a drastically different position now. So yeah, I'm willing to be that person that will speak truth to power and continue to do so. And there's a phrase from Steiner that I keep coming back to, and it's in a lot of my online courses. Enliven imagination, feel responsibility, and stand for truth. I think he gave that as a motto to the teachers in the set of lectures he gave, the Foundations of Human Experience, I think, Study of Man. And so that sense of responsibility weighs really heavily on me at times, that here in New Zealand, food is getting so expensive and our soil health is declining. Our water is not clean, and we have so many cows that if we could just show how good the cow manure is and show how it really is possible to grow the food we need and grow top quality food, that we could quite easily become an organic country and even a biodynamic country. You know, it's what we experienced during the initial stages of the pandemic was that, you know, we didn't have COVID because we had this, we just shut the borders. We were able to, that we could kind of close off New Zealand to all of those toxic pesticides and fertilizers and just say, you know what, we are putting soil first and water quality first. Yeah. And I think the indigenous culture here in New Zealand, the Maori culture, there's it's called Huapara Kore. It's a verification program that I'm actually studying, that it feels to me that the government is far more likely to put money behind the spiritual foundations of Maori agriculture than biodynamics. And they're so aligned.
Yeah, and that's one of the beauties as well of biodynamics, or that you can combine it with traditional agriculture and combine it with other practices while still using is not the right word, but while co-creating with biodynamics, I would say.
Choosing which of the biodynamic tools are going to work for a situation. Yeah.
So I love that aspect of you mentioning that your main goal was to spread mainstream biodynamics, and I think that's also quite common with farmers that or gardeners, that they learn from one another, and that it's so important to see how other people are dealing with certain issues or what they're doing on their farms or in their gardens. And this is also the feedback of your people and community with the little survey you just did. And so for me, I really would love to motivate other people to follow you, to create more synergies all over the world, and to use this kind of technology to not separate from one another, but to really connect with one another and come together, exchange, and so on. And at the end of each podcast, I'm always asking the people the question of what are your 3 main reasons to keep up the work in biodynamics, and what keeps you motivated to still go further in that areas you're working.
Okay, the first one is there's a sense of urgency. I'm 49 years old. I'm not going to be growing my own food forever. And the trajectory we're on, I don't see the next generation feeding me biodynamic vegetables unless I teach them how to grow them. So there's that, you know, wanting my granddaughter to have good quality food, and know that when I stop being active in a professional sense, that I'll feel like I've done my bit. The second reason, it's about respect, and respecting the earth, and respecting people, to recognize what is needed for the earth, that putting aside all our sort of political motivations and financial motivations, that it's literally for the earth. And then thirdly, it kind of relates to the first one. One of my programs at the moment is called Junior Soilpreneurs. And I just have so much faith that the next generation, given the opportunity, will step into creating a profession of making beautiful soil and figuring out how to make that a livelihood that more and more people will want to embrace and create. I sort of feel like it's not that I'm paving a pathway, but I'm trying a bunch of stuff so that the people who come after me don't have to make the same mistakes and they can get somewhere faster. Yeah.
That's a lovely aspect. Thank you, Katrina, because that's basically what we wanted to do, maybe also with this podcast, to let the people speak that are working in biodynamics from the different stages. So from being at 1 year experience to like people who have 20, 30 years experience with biodynamics. And we wanted to include many different perspectives with this living farm project. I really would like to leave people with the idea to spread their word about biodynamics. Be aware, of course, of the risks of spreading it, as you mentioned, but still be brave and feel maybe also proud of what you're doing on your gardens and on your farms, because it's a lovely work you're doing for the earth, but also the community and partly also for yourself. So I thank you very much, Katrina, for taking the time and being in this podcast and taking the chance to have this chat here. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work you've done on every episode. I've really enjoyed listening to them.
You're very welcome. And yeah, we always see one another. So thanks for joining in.